Imagine walking through this forest. What do you see? Tall, silent trees reaching for the sky. A carpet of leaves underfoot. Dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. It seems so peaceful, so still, so quiet. But what if I told you that this apparent stillness is an illusion? What if I told you that beneath your feet, hidden from view, lies one of the most complex and ancient communication networks on our planet? A network so vast and sophisticated that scientists have nicknamed it the Wood Wide Web. For centuries, we viewed forests as collections of individual trees competing for resources: light, water, nutrients. The strongest survived, the weakest perished. It was a story of competition, of every tree for itself. But groundbreaking scientific discoveries have completely overturned this understanding. We now know that the forest is not a battlefield, it's a community. Trees communicate. They share resources. They warn each other of danger. They nurture their young. And they do all of this through a miraculous underground network of fungi. In this video, we're going to dive deep beneath the soil to explore this hidden social network. We'll uncover how trees talk to each other, how mother trees care for their seedlings, how warnings about insect attacks travel through the forest, and what happens when this delicate network is damaged. This isn't just a story about trees, it's a story about connection, cooperation, and the invisible bonds that sustain life on our planet. Before we begin this incredible journey, if you're as fascinated by the hidden wonders of nature as I am, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We explore amazing topics like this every day. Also, I love knowing where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you, so drop a comment with your location and the time right now. It's always amazing to see our global community connecting, much like the trees we're about to discuss. Now, let's step into the forest and uncover the secrets of the Wood Wide Web. To understand the Wood Wide Web, we first need to meet the architects of this hidden internet, the mycorrhizal fungi. Now, I know the word mycorrhizal might sound technical and complicated, but break it down with me. Myx is Greek for fungus, and rhiza means root. Quite simply, these are fungus roots. It's a partnership, a symbiotic relationship, between the fine, hair-like root tips of trees and a vast, web-like network of fungal threads. These fungal threads are called Hafee. Imagine the finest, most delicate white threads you can picture, each one much thinner than a human hair. Now, imagine these threads spreading out in every direction through the soil, weaving an incredibly dense and intricate web. A single teaspoon of healthy forest soil can contain kilometers of these hyphal threads. This fungal network connects not just to one tree, but to many trees simultaneously, sometimes linking hundreds of trees together across a vast area. This interconnected system is what scientists call a common mycorrhizal network, or as it's more poetically known, the Wood Wide Web. This partnership is a classic case of, you scratch my back, and I'll scratch yours. You see, both the trees and the fungi have something the other needs, and they've worked out a brilliant trade agreement that has lasted for millions of years. Let's look at what each partner brings to the table. The tree, with its green leaves, is a master of photosynthesis. It captures energy from the sun and converts it into sugary carbohydrates, essentially, food. This is the tree's great strength. But underground, the tree's roots are often not that efficient at gathering water and nutrients from the soil, especially when those nutrients are scarce or hard to reach. The fungus, on the other hand, lives in the dark. It can't photosynthesize. It has no way of making its own food. So, it needs a source of carbon, a source of sugar. But what the fungus lacks in culinary skills, it makes up for in its incredible foraging ability. Those hyphal threads are like a super-efficient exploration and delivery system. They spread far and wide, penetrating into the tiniest pores and crevices in the soil that the tree's roots could never access. The fungus is exceptionally good at gathering precious nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen, as well as water. So, here's the deal. The tree provides the fungus with a steady supply of delicious sugars and carbohydrates, essentially, payment in food. In return, the fungus provides the tree with water, nitrogen, phosphorus, and other hard-to-get minerals. It's a mutualistic relationship where both parties benefit. This isn't a rare or unusual arrangement. In fact, it's the rule rather than the exception. Nearly 90% of all land plants form these kinds of partnerships with mycorrhizal fungi. This relationship is ancient, dating back over 475 million years, and it's thought to have been crucial in helping plants first colonize dry land. They've been cooperating ever since. Now, the real magic begins when we realize that this isn't just a series of one-on-one relationships. A single fungal network can connect to multiple trees at the same time. Think of it like this. If each tree is a computer, the fungal hyphae are the Ethernet cables, linking them all together into a local area network. This is the foundation of the Wood Wide Web, an underground infrastructure that allows for the exchange of information and resources between different trees, even trees of different species. The implications of this connectivity are profound, and they fundamentally change our understanding of what a forest is. A forest is not merely a population of individual trees, it is a superorganism, an interconnected community where the well-being of one is linked to the well-being of many. In the following sections, we'll explore exactly what kind of traffic flows across this biological internet. We'll discover how trees use it to communicate, to share, and to support one another in ways we once thought impossible. One of the most beautiful and heartening discoveries about the Wood Wide Web is its role as a social safety net. It turns out that forests operate with a kind of socialist economy, where resources are redistributed according to need. This challenges the dog-eat-dog worldview of nature and replaces it with a story of community and mutual support. Let's start with the most vulnerable members of the forest community, the seedlings. A seedling sprouting on the dark forest floor is in a precarious position. It's tiny, it's fragile, and it's struggling for light and nutrients. Its own leaves aren't yet efficient enough at photosynthesis to produce all the sugar it needs to survive. So, how does it make it? Often, it gets help from its parents. Groundbreaking research by ecologist Dr. Suzanne Samar from the University of British Columbia revealed this incredible phenomenon. Dr. Samar, a young scientist with a hunch born from her childhood in the old-growth forests of British Columbia, was questioning the established wisdom that forests were merely collections of trees competing for survival. She had a feeling there was more to the story, a hidden layer of cooperation happening right under everyone's feet. But a hunch isn't science. To prove her idea, she needed evidence, and she devised a brilliantly clever experiment to get it. Now let's imagine her out in the forest. She wasn't in a laboratory with potted plants. She was working in a real, living, breathing forest ecosystem. Her subjects were specific trees, the stately Douglas fir, which was the prized timber tree, and the beautiful paper birch, often considered a weedy competitor that foresters would remove to give the firs a so-called advantage. But Samar suspected they weren't competitors at all. She thought they might be partners. To test this, she turned to a tool that sounds like something out of a spy movie: radioactive carbon tracing. Now, don't let the word radioactive scare you. It's simply a way for scientists to tag a molecule and follow it wherever it goes. Think of it like this: if you wanted to see where a hidden network of secret passages led in a castle, you could release a bunch of brightly colored, glow-in-the-dark butterflies into one room and then see where they pop up. The carbon-14 isotope was her glowing butterfly. Here's how it worked. All trees absorb carbon dioxide from the air. Through the miracle of photosynthesis, they use sunlight to convert this CO2 and water into sugary carbohydrates, their food. So, Samar placed large, clear plastic bags over the branches of specific birch trees. Inside these bags, she injected a special gas mixture. It was still carbon dioxide, the same stuff the tree always breathes, but this batch was made with carbon-14, the radioactive isotope. It's a harmless tracer. As the birch tree went about its daily business, it happily sucked up this, tagged, carbon dioxide, and with the power of the sun, it baked this special carbon into its food, its sugars. So now, everything the birch tree produced with that sugar was subtly glowing with a radioactive signature, a flag that Samar could detect with her scientific instruments. Then, the waiting game began. She let the forest do its thing for a season. The birch tree, connected to the vast underground fungal network, was presumably sharing its resources, and now those resources had a tracking device. After enough time had passed for this exchange to potentially happen, the detective work began. She took samples. She took samples from the birch trees that had been bagged, from nearby Douglas fir trees, and from the soil and fungi in between. She brought these samples back to her lab and used a device called a scintillation counter, which is essentially a Geiger counter for carbon-14. It can detect the faint radioactive signal of the isotope. And what she found was absolutely stunning. The tagged carbon, which had started in the leaves of the birch tree, had not stayed put. It had traveled down the birch tree's trunk, into its roots, and then, it had vanished from the scientific instruments watching the birch. But then, like magic, it reappeared in the readings taken from the roots and needles of the nearby Douglas fir trees. This was the first major aha moment. Carbon was moving from a birch tree to a fir tree. But a good scientist, like a good detective, has to rule out all other possibilities. Skeptics could have argued, well, maybe the carbon just leaked from the birch's roots into the soil and the fir tree's roots accidentally absorbed it. Maybe it's just a random seepage, not a direct transfer. So, Samar designed a control, a part of the experiment designed to eliminate these other explanations. This is the part of the story with the shading. She repeated the experiment, but this time, after injecting the carbon-14 into the birch trees, she shaded the Douglas fir seedlings. Now, why would she do that? Think about what happens to a tree when it's shaded. It can't photosynthesize as well. It can't make its own food as efficiently. It becomes stressed, and its resources become low. It becomes a sink, a place where resources are needed, rather than a source, a place where they are produced. And when she did this, the results were even more incredible. The flow of carbon from the birch to the fir didn't just continue, it increased. The birch tree was sending more help to the fir in its time of need. This was the clincher. This wasn't a passive leak, it was an active, regulated transfer. The network seemed to be responding to the needs of its members, shuttling resources from a place of abundance to a place of scarcity. But the final, beautiful twist came when the seasons changed. The paper birch is a deciduous tree. It loses its leaves in the fall. The Douglas fir is an evergreen. It holds on to its needles and can photosynthesize on mild winter days. Samar continued her measurements throughout the year. She discovered that in the summer, when the birch was in full leaf and was a prolific sugar factory, it was a net donor, sending more carbon to the fir than it received. But in the fall and winter, the roles reversed. The evergreen Douglas fir, still capable of producing some food, began sending its own carbon-based sugars back to the leafless birch, which was now in a state of need. This was no longer just a one-way donation, it was a reciprocal relationship, a genuine trade between different species. They weren't competitors, they were allies, helping each other weather the different challenges of the annual seasons. This was the foundation of the Wood Wide Web, a system where trees are interconnected in a complex social network, sharing resources, supporting the vulnerable, and ensuring the health and resilience of the entire forest community. Now you might be wondering, how is this even possible? What is the actual physical mechanism that allows a sugar molecule to travel from the root of a birch tree, through the soil, and into the root of a fir tree? The answer lies in the incredible architecture and biology of the fungal network itself. Those tiny, thread-like fungal hyphae we talked about are not just passive wires. They are living pipelines. Inside these hyphae, the fungus maintains a constant flow of cytoplasm, the liquid of life, bustling with nutrients and chemical messages. The fungus acts as a broker in a grand underground marketplace. It explores the soil with its vast, exploring network, gathering precious, hard-to-find nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen, things the trees desperately need but often can't access easily. It brings these nutrients to the trees. In return, the tree pays the fungus with the one thing it cannot make itself, carbon-rich sugar, the product of sunlight captured by leaves. This is the fundamental trade. But when a tree like the birch sends its sugar payment down to the fungus, that sugar doesn't just stop at the local fungal office. Because the fungal network is interconnected, that sugar can travel along the Hafee highways. If the fungus is also connected to a Douglas fir that is in need, perhaps because it's shaded or it's a struggling seedling, the resource can be transferred. The fungus facilitates this exchange, but the driving force seems to be the source-sink dynamic we saw with the shading experiment. Resources in a network naturally flow to where they are most needed. This is why Simard's discovery was so revolutionary. It showed that the forest floor is not a battlefield, it's a collaborative community, a living, breathing system where the success of the individual is inextricably linked to the success of the whole, all mediated by the silent, ancient, and endlessly fascinating wood wide web. These mother trees are the nodal points of the forest network. They are often the largest and oldest trees in the forest, with the most extensive root systems and the most fungal connections. They act as central hubs, much like servers on the internet, and they can be connected to hundreds of other trees. By feeding the seedlings through the fungal network, these mother trees dramatically increase the seedlings' chances of survival. In the forest, the towering, sun-drenched mother tree, with its vast canopy happily soaking up sunlight and converting it into sugary food through photosynthesis, is a carbon source. A tiny seedling, struggling for a glimpse of sunlight in the deep shade of the understory, is the child. It's a carbon sink. It needs more energy than it can possibly produce on its own. Through the wood wide web, the mother tree can send its excess carbon sugars to that struggling seedling, giving it a fighting chance. But the beautiful part is that this isn't just a one-way street, and it's not just about parents and children. The entire forest is woven together with these dynamic, shifting relationships. A tree that is a source one day might become a sink on another, depending on its circumstances. This is where the story gets even more fascinating, and it was brilliantly demonstrated by Dr. Suzanne Simard's work with two very different tree species, the Douglas fir and the paper birch. Imagine a sunny summer day in a forest in British Columbia. The paper birch, a deciduous tree, is in its full glory, its broad, flat leaves acting as super-efficient solar panels, capturing immense amounts of sunlight. It's a photosynthesis powerhouse, producing a huge surplus of carbon sugars. Right next to it, a young Douglas fir sapling, an evergreen, is trying to grow, but it's partly shaded, not just by the birch, but by the larger forest canopy. It can't make as much food. It's a sink. Through her ingenious experiments, where she injected radioactive carbon-14 into the birch trees and then tracked its movement, Dr. Simard discovered that the birch was actively sending its excess carbon through the underground fungal network to the shaded fir sapling. The birch was subsidizing its neighbor's growth. But then, the seasons changed. Autumn arrived. The days grew shorter. The magnificent paper birch began to drop its leaves, preparing for winter dormancy. Now, its ability to photosynthesize plummeted to zero. It had no leaves left to catch the sun. It became a sink. Meanwhile, the Douglas fir, being an evergreen, still held on to its needles. On a mild, sunny winter day, it could still carry out a bit of photosynthesis. The roles had completely reversed. Now, the Douglas fir became the source, and the dormant birch became the sink. And the incredible thing is, the flow of carbon reversed too. The fir began sending carbon back to the birch, helping to nourish it through the long winter until it could leaf out again in the spring. This two-way, back-and-forth exchange shows that this isn't just a simple act of charity, it's a sophisticated, reciprocal relationship. The two different species have, in a sense, worked out a trade agreement. They support each other through their times of need, ensuring that both can thrive in the same patch of earth. It's a powerful demonstration that the forest is not just a collection of individuals competing for the same pie, it's a community where the members have figured out how to make the pie bigger for everyone by working together, by specializing, and by trading what they have in surplus for what they lack. This flow of resources isn't some haphazard leak, it's a regulated, dynamic transfer. Scientists believe the network itself helps facilitate this based on the principle of source and sink dynamics. It's like water flowing downhill. Resources naturally move to where they are most needed, to the areas of lowest concentration. A struggling seedling, a shaded sapling, or a tree attacked by insects sends out chemical signals, either through its roots or via the fungi themselves, that essentially announce, "I'm in need here." This creates a powerful sink that pulls resources from the healthier, more resource-rich trees, the sources, through the fungal pipelines. The fungi, in their own self-interest, play a crucial role as the active brokers in this system. A healthy, diverse forest with many thriving trees means more, and more reliable, carbon payments for the fungi. It's in the fungus's own best interest to keep the entire community healthy and balanced. So, they don't just act as passive pipes. They can actively help direct the flow, investing in the parts of the network that will provide the best long-term returns, much like a banker might invest in a promising new business to ensure the whole town's economy stays strong. And while carbon is the primary currency, the food that powers the entire system, this incredible underground economy trades in so much more than just sugar. The same mycorrhizal highways that transport carbon are also bustling with the traffic of essential nutrients, and even water. Let's talk about nitrogen and phosphorus. These are vital elements for building proteins and DNA, for energy transfer, and for overall growth. But for trees, they are often locked up in the soil in forms that the tree roots cannot directly absorb. The fungal network, however, is masterful at mining these nutrients. The incredibly fine fungal hyphae, so much thinner than even the finest root hair, can penetrate into the tiniest pores in the soil, accessing pockets of phosphorus and nitrogen that are completely out of reach for the tree. The fungus gathers these precious nutrients and, in exchange for carbon, passes them over to the tree. But it doesn't just pass them to the tree it's directly connected to. If one tree in the network is sitting in a patch of nitrogen-poor soil, but is connected via the web to a fungus that's also linked to a tree in a nitrogen-rich spot, the nutrient can be shuttled through the network to the tree in need. It's a distribution system that helps to homogenize the availability of resources across the entire forest floor, making sure that a local patch of bad soil doesn't have to mean a death sentence for a tree. Perhaps one of the most stunning and vital resources that moves through this network is water. In a fascinating experiment that the user's message alluded to, scientists used stable isotopes of water, essentially traceable water molecules, to follow their path through the forest. They provided this tagged water to one tree, and to their amazement, they detected that same isotopic signature in the neighboring trees not long after. This water wasn't traveling through the air or seeping slowly through the soil. It was moving via the direct, living conduits of the mycorrhizal network. This has profound implications, especially in times of drought. Imagine a tall, old mother tree with a deep, extensive root system that can tap into deep soil water reserves that shallower-rooted seedlings can't reach. During a dry spell, that mother tree can act as a reservoir, drawing up water and sharing it with the desperately thirsty youngsters around it through the fungal connections. This hydraulic lift and redistribution are like an emergency irrigation system, a life support network that kicks in when conditions get tough. It's a stunning example of how the community looks out for its most vulnerable members, ensuring the next generation survives to carry on the forest's legacy. Perhaps one of the most poignant examples of this sharing happens when a tree is dying. There is compelling evidence to suggest that when a tree is attacked by a pathogen or is succumbing to old age, it will often undertake a kind of last will and testament. In its final days, the tree will dump a significant portion of its accumulated resources, its carbon, its nutrients, into the mycorrhizal network. These resources are then absorbed and used by the healthy trees nearby. The knowledge and resources of a lifetime are not lost to the forest. They are recycled and reinvested into the community. The dying tree literally gives its body back to the network that sustained it. This cooperative resource sharing helps to stabilize the entire forest ecosystem. It ensures that struggling individuals get a helping hand, that the young are nurtured, and that the wisdom of the old is not lost. It creates a forest that is more resilient, more stable, and more capable of weathering the challenges of a changing environment. The forest, it turns out, thrives not on ruthless competition, but on a delicate balance of competition and cooperation, with the wood wide web facilitating the latter in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. If sharing resources was the only function of the wood wide web, it would still be a revolutionary discovery. But the network's capabilities are even more astonishing. It also serves as an early warning system, a forest-wide alert service that allows trees to prepare for incoming threats. We've all experienced the power of a warning. A weather alert allows us to batten down the hatches before a storm. A message from a friend about traffic ahead lets us take a different route. For trees, the threats are constant: hungry insects, invasive pathogens, and browsing animals. They can't run away, so their only defense is to make themselves unpalatable or toxic. But producing these defensive compounds takes time and energy. It's much more efficient to produce them before the attack begins, and that's exactly what the Wood Wide Web allows them to do. The science here is truly mind-boggling. Let me walk you through a classic experiment that demonstrated this phenomenon. Researchers grew pairs of tomato plants in pots, allowing them to become connected by a common mycorrhizal network, but ensuring their roots and air contact were separated. Then, they introduced aphids to one of the plants, infesting it with the sap-sucking insects. The infested plant, under attack, did something remarkable. It began producing defensive chemicals to try to fight off the aphids. But it also did something else. It sent a signal through the mycorrhizal network to its neighboring, uninfested tomato plant. Upon receiving this signal, the neighbor, which had not yet been touched by any insect, immediately began pumping out its own defensive chemicals. It was preparing for an attack that hadn't even arrived yet. When aphids were later introduced to the second plant, they found it already fortified and unpalatable, and their growth and reproduction were significantly reduced. This wasn't a fluke. Similar studies have been conducted with trees. In one experiment, when Douglas fir trees were attacked by budworms, they sent out a warning through the mycorrhizal network to nearby ponderosa pines. The pines, upon receiving the signal, preemptively increased their production of defense enzymes, making themselves less susceptible to a potential future attack. So, what is the nature of this warning signal? While scientists are still unraveling the precise chemistry, it's believed that the stressed tree releases certain chemical signals into its roots, a kind of chemical SOS. These could be specific hormones or other infochemicals associated with stress and injury. These chemicals then travel along the hyphal filaments of the fungal network, much like a signal traveling through a wire. When they reach the roots of a connected neighbor, the neighbor eavesdrops on this signal and interprets it correctly. Danger is near. Arm yourself. This process is incredibly sophisticated. It means that the knowledge of a threat experienced by one tree can be communicated to dozens, perhaps hundreds, of other trees, allowing the entire community to raise its collective defenses. This dramatically improves the survival rate of the forest as a whole. It's a powerful demonstration of how connectivity and communication can enhance the resilience of an entire ecosystem. The trees are talking. They are telling each other stories of danger and survival. And they are listening. The forest is having a conversation, and we are only just beginning to understand the language. Now, it is important to acknowledge, as any good scientist would, that this field of study is dynamic and that some of the most extraordinary claims are being met with healthy scientific scrutiny. The three researchers who pioneered much of this work have themselves urged caution, explaining that the beautiful narrative of the cooperative forest has sometimes run ahead of the solid, reproducible evidence. For example, the idea that seedlings generally and consistently benefit from being connected to large trees via the network is not as clear-cut as once thought. When reviewing numerous field studies, scientists have found that the outcome varies dramatically. Sometimes connected seedlings do better, sometimes they do worse, and sometimes there's no difference at all. The same caution applies to some of the claims about widespread warning signals and kin recognition. While these phenomena have been observed in some laboratory or highly controlled settings, demonstrating that they happen consistently and powerfully in the complex, messy environment of a real forest is much more difficult. Some ecologists have pointed out that the vast majority of the evidence for these common mycorrhizal networks comes from just a few forest types, like the Douglas fir forests of the Pacific Northwest, and that we can't automatically assume they function the same way in every forest around the world, from the Amazon rainforest to the African savanna. Furthermore, there are other ways resources could move between trees that don't involve a direct fungal superhighway. For instance, A root from one tree could exude carbon-rich compounds into the soil, and a nearby root of a different tree could accidentally absorb it. This would look like sharing, but it would be a much more passive, less directed process than the active routing of resources through a coordinated network. This doesn't mean the Wood Wide Web is a myth. The fundamental symbiotic relationships are undeniable. But it does mean that the full extent of its function as a cooperative, intelligent social network is an active and exciting area of research. It's a wonderful example of how science self-corrects and refines its understanding over time, moving from a revolutionary, exciting idea to a more nuanced and deeply investigated reality. Despite these necessary nuances, the overarching picture that emerges is one of breathtaking complexity and interconnection. The forest is a system where the fate of every tree is linked to the fate of its neighbors, mediated by a silent, ancient, and pervasive fungal internet. It's a system where generosity is built into the very fabric of life, not as an abstract ideal, but as a practical, evolved strategy for survival and resilience. By sharing resources, by warning each other of danger, and by supporting the young and the struggling, the trees create a community that is far stronger and more resilient than any individual could ever be on its own. So, the next time you walk through a forest, I hope you'll remember this hidden world beneath your feet. The silent trees are not so silent after all. They are engaged in a constant, quiet conversation, a lively barter of sugar, water, nutrients, and messages, all flowing through the living, breathing web of the Wood Wide Web. It's a conversation that has been going on for millions of years, and it's one that we are only just beginning to listen in on and understand. For centuries, our relationship with forests has been largely extractive. We've managed them for timber, often viewing them as collections of individual wood-producing units. The discovery of the Wood Wide Web forces us to confront a new reality. Our management practices have consequences we never even considered, because we were unaware of the hidden social networks we were destroying. When a logger's chainsaw bites into the trunk of a giant mother tree, the damage extends far beyond that single tree. It's the ecological equivalent of taking down a major internet hub. All the connections, the flow of carbon to seedlings, the transfer of warnings, the trading of nutrients, that were routed through that hub are suddenly severed. The network becomes fragmented. Clear cutting, the practice of removing every single tree from an area, is perhaps the most devastating. It doesn't just remove the trees, it destroys the very fabric of the Wood Wide Web. The fungal network, deprived of its host plants that supply it with carbon, begins to die back. The intricate, centuries-old web of connections is torn apart. The result is an ecological silence. The flow of information stops. The sharing of resources ceases. This has direct and observable consequences for forest recovery. Seedlings that sprout in a clear-cut area are orphaned. They are disconnected from the supportive network of the old forest. They have to start from scratch, forming new relationships with whatever fungal propagules remain in the soil. This is a much slower and more difficult process. Studies have shown that seedlings growing near retained mother trees, with access to the existing mycorrhizal network, have a significantly higher survival rate and grow much faster, especially under stressful conditions like drought, than seedlings growing in clear-cut areas. The discovery of the Wood Wide Web is now inspiring a new, more holistic approach to forestry. Instead of clear-cutting, some foresters and ecologists are advocating for practices that preserve the integrity of the underground network. This includes retaining hub trees, leaving behind the largest, oldest mother trees when harvesting. These living legacies continue to act as nodes, supporting the regeneration of the new forest by inoculating seedlings with their fungi and providing them with resources. Protecting soil structure, minimizing soil disturbance and compaction during logging operations to avoid physically ripping apart the delicate fungal mycelium. Encouraging diversity, planting a diversity of tree species that can form partnerships with a wide range of fungi, creating a more robust and resilient network. The message from the science is clear: the health of a forest is inextricably linked to the health of its underground social network. By recognizing this, we can learn to harvest timber in a way that is not only sustainable but also respectful of the forest's innate connectedness. We can work with the forest's own systems of cooperation and regeneration, rather than blindly hacking them apart. The future of forestry may depend on our ability to listen to the quiet wisdom of the wood wide web. So, the next time you find yourself walking through a forest, I hope you'll remember this hidden world beneath your feet. The silent trees are not so silent after all. They are engaged in a constant, quiet conversation. They are sharing food with their children, sending warnings to their neighbors, and trading resources with different species. They are connected by a vast, ancient, and intelligent network, the wood wide web. This isn't just a biological curiosity. It's a powerful metaphor, a lesson in the fundamental importance of connection and cooperation. In a world that often feels increasingly disconnected, the forest reminds us that we, too, are part of a network. Our actions, like those in the forest, ripple outwards, affecting the entire system. From the tiny, delicate hyphae of a fungus to the towering majesty of a centuries-old mother tree, the wood wide web is a story of how life thrives through relationship. It's a story that has been unfolding for hundreds of millions of years, written in a language of chemistry and connection, hidden just beneath the surface. I hope this journey into the secret life of forests has filled you with as much wonder as it has me. It certainly makes me look at every tree, every patch of moss, every fallen log with a new sense of respect and awe. And with that, I must bring our exploration to a close. The sun is setting here, and the forest is getting ready for the night. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is for you, whether you're watching this with your morning coffee or just before bed, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. If you're watching this late at night, I wish you a good night. May your dreams be as interconnected and wonderful as the wood wide web. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.